Patty Duke's book. That's what you see. So the bipolarity is present in the style of the writing itself. It's subtle, but once you catch on to it, it's just kind of amazing. Also, Kay Jamison's book, Touched by Fire, shows her love for manic depressive illness because she associates it with the great creative geniuses of the past. So the positive feelings she has toward it all are reflected there as well. Okay? So what's the point of all that? Well, I'm still struggling with this boulder in the medical model because, if we look at Kay Jamison, for example, we see she has a delusion, she has a hallucination. These are symptoms, these are signs of illness, but phenomenology doesn't accept that. It says instead, every one of these things that is shown to us is embedded in a world, expresses that world, and our job is to understand that. And if we do understand it, we're in a better position to figure out what it is we can do, if anything, that might make a positive difference to this person's life. Why is this not the mainstream? Hopefully someday it will become that. To me, it's just the most obvious thing in the world. So that's all for now on the medical model, although we'll come back to it. I feel like I'm dissing psychiatry, though, and I'm a little bit unhappy about that. I was driving in this morning thinking, it's easy to just say it's horrible, psychiatrists are evil, the classification system's awful and dehumanizing, and let's man the barricades and blow the place up and fire them all and lock them all away. But you know what would happen if we locked up all the psychiatrists? People in very, very bad trouble would be dumped in our laps instead. Psychiatrists are like the last men standing, the last men and women standing for people in very serious trouble. And whatever the problems are, I feel sorry for them, and I want to support them as best I can. So I don't want to just say they're evil, and it's easy to say that. We need to find new ways of classifying, understanding, intervening in people's lives to replace what exists right now, not just trash the psychiatrists as if we know better what to do, because often we don't. So anyway, so I have nice feelings towards psychiatrists, even though I can't talk to them, except for my friend Bernie Grenchef is the only one. And barely him anymore, because he can't hardly talk anymore. He's 93 years old. Anyway. Let me begin another one, though, too, because we've now done 2 boulders. Supposedly we're by my little fantasy, but they're shooting at us from behind, so watch out. Keep your eye on your back and look back there, because the sharpshooters and snipers and all this are coming to kill you. And want to kill me real badly. We won't let you do it. We refuse to die. Anyway, there's another monster before us. A huge thing, and it's strangely connected to the medical model too. There's a bridge of stone linking the third one to the second one in my fantasy. You'll see as we go what I'm talking about. I'm going to describe abstractly what's going on in the third boulder, but I have many case examples to give you. Probably not time today to do anything very elaborate. But let me just describe what the third one is in an abstract way. I have the phrase written up on the board, the doctrine of reality with a capital R. That is boulder number 3. What is the doctrine of reality with a capital R? It's not formally a doctrine that's written down anywhere except maybe by me, but it's a way of thinking and believing about the relationship between a human being and the surrounding world. There are 3 parts to it, really. So just flow with me abstractly, and then I'll concretely exemplify it in my case descriptions. It'll become real clear to you what it is, I hope. One part of this so-called doctrine, or this way of thinking, would be the notion that there is such a thing as the real external world. The real, objective, true external world does exist. Like, there is the idea that there is no such thing as the external world. It's an illusion. Buddhism, Hinduism basically say it's an illusion, and we need to detach ourselves from it. But the doctrine of reality with a capital R says, no, there is an absolute external, real universe out there. It has certain features and doesn't have certain other features. That's one. A second, there are 3 pieces to this. A second feature, or second aspect of this doctrine, which is the third great boulder, is the idea that the clinician, the therapist, the psychotherapist, the psychiatrist, the George Atwood or the you or whoever the social worker is, The counselor, the professional in the situation, has a privileged access to that real external world. His or her judgment is correct, is in line with the truth of what is there. Okay? There is a real world, and the clinician has access to what, and has definite, valid knowledge of what it is. Those two elements right there that I just told you, if you combine those two, they lead to a third element, inevitably, I think. And it would be this: that since there is a real external world, and I know I have privileged access and definite understanding of what it is, then in my work with you, if you're the patient, what I want to have happen is for you to gain knowledge of this real external world too. I want you to be in contact with it. So a goal of therapy derives out of these first two assumptions to make you more realistic, to restore or establish for the first time your contact with the objective environment, to make sure your reality contact is adequate, okay, and if it's not, to improve it. Phenomenology doesn't think this way, and a phenomenological approach does not have it as a goal to make you more realistic, to make you more in contact with the external world at all. In fact, phenomenology doesn't subscribe to any part of this. It says phenomenology has a doctrine of realities plural, like with a small r, that each person has his or her own reality, and they live in that reality. And the therapist has a reality, the patient has a reality, the two may overlap at certain points, differ from each other at other points, but one is not necessarily more valid than the other. Doctrine of reality, the capital R, says the therapist's reality is more valid than the patient's. And if the therapist is going to help the patient, they've got to bring them into contact with that valid world. That's basically it right there. So there's a kind of authoritarian aspect that is generated out of this. If you're the patient and I'm the doctor and I know what's real, and you may know partly what's real but be out of touch with what's not real, you think something's not real is real, then I want to help you overcome your delusion or your illusion. I want to correct your misperceptions. Okay? That becomes part of the therapy. That is a deep part of much psychotherapeutic practice, and one of the main things that you're assessed for if you go into a mental hospital is the adequacy of your reality contact. And one of the goals of the treatment is to bring you into contact with reality. So medical practice is deeply involved in this. That's why there's a stone bridge between boulder number 2 and boulder number 3. They go together, but I like to separate them for our discussion. What would be a goal of therapy for a phenomenologist? It wouldn't be to correct your misperceptions, to undo your delusions, to remove your hallucinations from you. That would not be what it would be. Your goal would be to understand what it is, what you think of as delusions or hallucinations, to understand their meaning, and hope that out of that understanding something creative could occur. But you wouldn't define the success of that as being your getting the person to conform to what is real and true. So the goal would be more to reach the truth of a person's life, to help them maybe establish a more coherent sense of who they were in the first place. But the actual content of what they regarded as real and true would be completely secondary in the whole thing. Now maybe I'll just give you the first part of the story that illustrates a phenomenological approach to something that might seem on the face of it to be completely delusional and crazy. Long story short again, okay? One fine evening as I was driving home, this is another time traveling deal, I got a call on my cell phone. This would be about 18 years ago now. And I remember it was 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the sun was going down, I'm driving into the town where I live, and I pull over to the side so I can talk on the phone to the person who's called me, and I said hello, and she said, hi, this is Ann, I'll say, or Sarah, or whatever her name we'll call her. I said, yeah. She said, I called you a few years ago, but you were unavailable, but now I'm in trouble. I've got to talk to somebody. I can't anybody to call but you. I didn't remember having talked to her a few years before, but I apparently refused to see her because I was too busy at the time, or thought I was too busy at the time. And so instead, she had spent the previous 5 or 6 years seeing a colleague of mine instead in New York City, 3 times a week. A very expensive psychoanalyst, $180 an hour, 3 times a week. 5 or 6 years. That really adds up. You're talking $150,000 or something she'd spent on her analysis. But she said, something's begun to happen to me. And I said, what's begun to happen to you, Sarah? And she described something that she was frightened I would be put off by hearing. She said that she was having repeating experiences as she sat in her office. She was a highly paid healthcare professional, not a like healthcare. She was an administrative person in a healthcare organization. $100,000 a year, smart as could be, very successful. She would sit in her office, and suddenly she felt her whole entire body swooshed out the window somehow, catapulting, tumbling through space, and then being sucked into her own mother's bloodstream, like somehow whoosh right into her mother's body and blood. I don't know, she must have been shrinking down to the size where she'd fit inside the veins. And suddenly she was in the veins, and the blood was rushing, and she was spinning and swimming and trying to keep her head out of the water and breathe, but being swept under and under in the blood. And then the horrifying recognition as she's coursing through her mother's veins that her body's melting and flaking away and dissolving into the thing, and her face, her nose is disappearing, and her lips are, and her eyelids are gone, and her whole face, and suddenly the hallucination ends in the idea that she's indistinguishable from the blood. She just melts and merges and is dissolved completely in the blood. And it's a terrorizing, horrible thing. And then she'd be back in her office again. What just happened to me? And she didn't know what it was. She said, what the hell is happening to me? I don't know what it is, George. And I said, well, geez. I didn't know what it was either. So I asked her, did she tell her analyst about that? She said, yes. And I said, what does he say? He said to her the following, and these were his words quoted by her to me as I'm sitting there at 5 o'clock in the afternoon in my car. You are suffering a series of transitory psychotic episodes, most likely brought on by serious stress. That was his phrasing. And if you listen to that phrasing, you can tell he's operating with the doctrine of reality with a capital R. The word psychotic means, among other things, it means out of touch with reality. Doctrine of reality with a capital R is built into the concept of psychosis itself. Phenomenology doesn't use the concept of psychosis, actually. It's a challenge to find language that is consistent with phenomenology, but you'll see as we go more examples of what I'm talking about. So he in essence was telling her, my dear, you're going crazy, and you flip in and out of these crazy states. That's all it was. I said, what's the effect on you of being told that? It doesn't help. It's no big surprise. It doesn't help at all. It frightened her. Am I crazy? Am I crazy? Why is this happening? She began to cry then on the phone to me. And I was thinking about it. She went on to say sometimes it's other members of her family. She goes into the bloodstream of her mother, but it might be her father. It might be 2 or 3 brothers that she had. She's all of their blood, and she's there and dissolving, and flaking and dissolving. Why is this happening? And what I sometimes do, occasionally it works out, occasionally it leads to near disaster. People will tell me something that doesn't make any sense, or to me at first. I'll just let the images flow over me, and I picture like a waterfall going over my head, and the water is streaming down around me and all over the place, and the words and images are the waterfall. And I just wait to see if my mind comes up with something that might be relevant to what it is. But that allowing of the images to go over me isn't trying to open to phenomenological meaning. It's not to diagnose or classify. She's having a hallucination, a symptom of psychosis. Maybe she's schizophrenic. That's the men on hooks working overtime there. But instead, I'm looking for the heart and soul, the truth that might be carried inside. I think hallucinations carry truth, but the truth is often metaphorical. So you have to listen softly and symbolically, and you might be able to catch on to what it might be. And if you do, you might just find something that helps you help the person. So as I sat there listening to the story, and I tell this story in Abyss of Madness, by the way, it's in chapter 2. The following idea came to me. At first I didn't want to say it, but I said, oh shit, I'll just say it. And I asked her in the following way. I said, Susan or Sarah, I have a question for you. She's whimpering, crying, and all this. I said, is it possible that your entire family is nothing but a bunch of blood-sucking vampires? That was my question. Nothing but a bunch of blood-sucking vampires? Where did that come from? Was the imagery of the blood being sucked into something someone was sucking her into something and sucking the life right out of her and dissolving her own identity away from her. It just came to me like that. 20 seconds, she didn't say anything. It was just silence. I thought we lost our connection at first. And then she finally said, after 20 seconds, she said, no one has ever said anything like that to me in my entire life about her family. She didn't say it was wrong. It turned out to be right. They were blood-sucking vampires. She was deeply enmeshed in her family, being taken advantage of emotionally in the most profound sorts of ways. Her psychiatrist, her psychoanalyst was also a serious vampire. He was taking $180 a session 3 times a week for 5 or 6 years, just sucking the money. He drove like a big golden Mercedes and wore these boots brought in from England, from Italy, special boots that were made and all this. I didn't tell her that he was a vampire. She herself came to that a little bit later. Now here's the amazing thing about it. Guess what happened to that hallucination as a result of my little question? Gone, without a trace. I don't know if all hallucinations could be dealt with if you just went to the heart of the matter and saw the truth that they contain. But I know this, that they often do symbolize what has gone awry in a person's life. And if someone's around to understand the meaning and understand the truth that is expressed, the patient's going to do a lot better than if there's not. Was this patient helped a lot? Profoundly by that little statement. But that was just the beginning of a long and difficult and stormy relationship I had with her, because Pandora's box began to open then, and a whole life history of the most terrible abuse I've almost ever heard from anyone began to pour out of her. And she'd had 5 or 6 years with her analyst. She'd never told them about what had happened. I'll give you some of that next time. Okay, we'll stop there today.